banned the word transitory from the economic outlook, this line. So I guess we're in line for this. Look, I think there are two things. One is effectively we've shown this in the economic outlook, we keep revising upward and longer the inflation pressure. And in some countries, it's mostly due to the supply disruption, but that's 10 months that this has been going on. So we have to be careful and to monitor clearly and keep that in mind. If the situation, the health situation deteriorates, we'll see, or prolongs, we'll see how that evolves. I think what's very important when we think about this, and we've been recommending, is that central banks, first, their life and job is difficult at the moment, but what we require from them is clear communication, that they explain where they stand, that they explain where they want to go, depending on the state, on the economy, depending on the data that comes, and the way they affect their projections.
I guess the other point to make is that up until this point, the inflation outlook in the US was somewhat different to the inflation outlook in the euro area. And so, clearly the Fed and Mr. Powell make reflections in relation to the outlook specifically for the US. But as Laurence previously explained, I mean, there is a marked difference between the situation in the US and in the euro area.
Turn to a question from Tim Wallace, The Telegraph in the UK. Please, can you tell me why you have upgraded the UK GDP forecast for 2021, even as you have cut the forecasts for the US, the Eurozone and China?
So most of the revisions which are in this economic outlook come from the publication of quarterly data. So it's from history. It's not us making speculation about the future. So in effect, the path to the recovery both in the US and the UK has barely moved.
A question from Assis Moreira of Valor Econômico in Brazil. The report mentions in Brazil higher interest rates and policy uncertainty. Would you say the pace of recovery is slowing in Brazil much more because of internal factors than for external factors like China? And what to expect in terms of inflation in Latin America and Brazil in 2022?
So Brazil is one of the countries where inflation has gone up quite fast, partly because of the tensions we've described, partly because of food prices as well, partly because of the weather disrupting energy production. So the central banks has reacted and fairly quickly, and obviously that will allow to address inflation. It may take more time, the pass-through of central bank actions into economic activity and prices is usually between 9 months to 1 year or a little more.
There's a question from Kevin Claire, who's an agricultural reporter. Bonjour, croyez-vous au super cycle haussier des matières premières, incluant celles agricoles, les grains notamment, comme suggère Goldman Sachs dans une étude en 2020?
Alors, il y a une chose qu'on observe assez clairement, c'est effectivement la hausse des prix de matières premières, non seulement dans l'énergie, comme on en a parlé, mais aussi dans l'agriculture, notamment le blé, notamment en raison des conditions météo, par exemple au Canada. Et c'est vrai que ça peut créer des tensions sur la nourriture. Une des raisons pour lesquelles on insiste sur ces tensions, que ce soit la nourriture ou l'énergie ou les transports, c'est le panier de consommation d'un ménage, c'est essentiellement nourriture, énergie pour chauffer la maison et pour bouger, et le loyer. Et c'est vrai que c'est les 3 points sur lesquels on voit des hausses des prix, et c'est les 3 points sur lesquels les ménages peuvent se mettre à anticiper plus de hausse des prix, et on peut voir l'inflation, les anticipations d'inflation augmenter. Donc pour nous, c'est un sujet que l'on doit suivre de très très près.
Will Horobin from Bloomberg asks, could you give us a bit more detail on why you have cut growth forecasts for China and the US?
Sorry, why we have put what?
Why you have cut growth forecasts for China and the US?
So for the US, I think I've answered. It's mostly historical data, and by the way, for the record, we've included the infrastructure bill in the US. Sorry, so we have not downgraded it. It's the same projection by the end of the period. For China, there's much less support than there was before, and also much less rebound. So China is returning to its 5% growth target in 2022 and 2023. One thing about China is we're really highlighting some of the imbalances. And obviously, China is very big in the world economy, right? It's one of the largest exporter, one of the largest consumer of commodities. And if when China slows down that quickly, then it has an impact on demand addressed to the rest of the world. So we have to be careful of what's happening with China.
Richard Partington from The Guardian in the UK. Could Omicron lead to a fall in global GDP from your 4.5% forecast in 22? You say Omicron could fuel higher and more persistent inflation. But could it also affect demand? Could the impact from Omicron be that demand is more heavily affected than supply?
I actually have laid out two scenarios. One is where it creates more supply disruptions and prolongs higher inflation for longer, and one where it's more severe and we have to use more mobility restrictions, in which case demand could decline and then inflation could actually recede much faster than what we have here. And there could even be a scenario where we would need more fiscal support at this stage.
There are no more questions. We have one more question coming through on the chat. Okay, it's a follow-up question on Spain from the Radio Nacional. Est-ce que la grande révision, la baisse des prévisions de croissance, plus de 2 points par rapport à septembre, s'explique aussi parce que l'Institut statistique a révisé ses chiffres sur la croissance du deuxième trimestre 2021. C'est juste une question sur l'économie espagnole et comment...
Non, mais c'est effectivement pour un certain nombre de pays, il y a eu des révisions à la baisse sur le deuxième ou sur le troisième trimestre. Je crois que ce qui est important de garder en tête, c'est qu'en général, quand il y a une révision à la baisse, c'est parce qu'on a une resurgence, ça ne doit pas être très français, mais une hausse du virus. Et après, quand cet épisode d'activité virale disparaît, finalement, on a un rebond le trimestre suivant. Donc, c'est un rééquilibrage entre trimestres, mais le trajet, la direction, la force aussi de la reprise, elle n'a pas changé.
Thank you all for your questions.